functionality can be implemented in the form of a software module. Now, when you're implementing it in the form of a software module, this can either be implemented at the router end or it can be implemented at the switch end. So this means that in one of the case, you can have a proper dedicated system or the dedicated hardware which is referred as a firewall, or you can have another set where you can have usage of a particular hardware and escalate its functionality by incorporating the software module which has the firewall functionalities. Okay, now there are some additional firewall basing considerations which are employed when we are using or when we are deploying a firewall. Now, the first case which we will discuss about is patient host.
Ma'am, Jamboard is not visible.
Jamboard is not visible. Okay.
No, ma'am.
Is it visible now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
So we'll be discussing about Bayesian host. Okay. Now, what is Bayesian host? This is normally used in those servers which are implementing or which are providing platform for application level proxy or a circuit level gateway. Okay. So if I say it again, when you're considering Bayesian host, the firewalls which would normally be implemented would be ALP, that is application level proxy or application level gateway, and second one is circuit level gateway. So it provides a platform for both of these systems. Okay. Now Bayesian host is a special purpose system or a special purpose system on network which is specifically designed and configured to handle the attacks. Okay. Now the system generally, which is referred as Bayesian host, hosts a single application. Okay, so this host which is comprising, it would only host a single application. Okay. Now, when it is hosting a single application, this application could be a normal proxy server or any other services, okay, which are there onto the systems would either be reduced or these be removed. Why would these be done? This be done? This would just be done to reduce the possibility of attack or to reduce the threat of the computer. Okay. Normally, this is also a proper standalone system in which there would be multiple services running. Now, since we want to make it as a part of a Bayesian host, what we'll do, we'll only run only the required set of services on this particular host. So if I say that this is a required set of services, it could only run the firewall service or the services which are essential to run that particular firewall. Okay. Now, why is it done? This is majorly done to reduce the possibility of attack on it, and also since it would be placed either in the network domain or it would be present outside the network domain. Okay, so if it present outside the domain, it would obviously be said that it would be more prone to attack. Okay, so that is why if you have lesser number of services running onto it, we'll refer it as we are hardening the system. And why is this hardening being done? This hardening is done due to its location, which would be done either outside the firewall or it could be done within a particular network. Okay. Now, the Bayesian host would execute a very secure version of the operating system. That secure version would also harden the system. Okay, it would have the very essential services which have been installed by the network administrator. This normally would have applications like DNS, SMTP, FTP, or HTTP running. Okay. The other thing which is involved in Bayesian host is that it may require additional authentication scheme. Okay. Why is this additional authentication required and for whom it is required? This is required before a user is allowed to access the services which are residing on the system. So before a user is allowed to access the proxy services, he would be asked for a valid authentication entry. Okay. Other than this, what can be added is whatever services which are running on this particular patient host or whatever proxy service is running on this patient host can also have their own authentication. Okay, so what does it mean? that फायरवॉल के पास तो ऑब्वियसली ऑथेंटिकेशन स्कीम होगा ही होगा क्योंकि हमने बोला था कि एएल और सीएल में ऑथेंटिकेशन रिक्वायर्ड होगा. But along with this firewall's authentication, first there can be a system which requires the user to first authenticate to access this patient host. Other authentication which can be embedded in the system is if there are multiple proxy services, that to the limited proxy services which are running, these could also have their own authentication scheme. Okay. Now, since there is a subset of the services which is or there is a subset of the applications which is running over here, there would also be subset of the command set which can run on those applications. Okay. Now there would be proper logging of the information of all of the traffic which flows onto this patient host. So technically, this is a proper standalone system, but it is behaving as a complete firewall. Okay. The other major important factor which is there in your Bayesian host is that your Bayesian host is independent of other proxies. Okay, or I can say that the services which are running on the particular Bayesian host are independent of the other proxy services which are running on that Bayesian host. Okay, so if there is a problem with the operation of any proxy or if any in the near future there is any vulnerability which is discussed, what can happen is that you can uninstall that specific service or that specific proxy without affecting the other proxy applications which are there on that particular host. Okay. Also, you can do scaling as well. So if there is a user which set which requires the support of a particular new service, then your network administrator can install the required proxy on that particular Bayesian host. Okay. The other important thing which is there is that this would require no disk access. Now, what does this mean? When we say this, normally when any proxy service is running onto the system, this would read the configuration file. Okay, so in case of a Bayesian host, a proxy generally performs no disk access other than it would do read access to its initial configuration file. Okay, when this is there, the portions of the file which the system is executing or the one which contains the executable code may be in the form of a read-only mode. Okay, when this is in the form of a read-only mode, this would make the intruder or the attacker much difficult to uh, exploit the vulnerabilities which are there or to install any sort of Trojan using the sniffers or the packet sniffers or any other files which are residing on that particular version host. So it can be said that there could be a case where your version host has certain malicious code present which can affect the other files which are there onto the system. Now the file which is basically used by the proxy services is the initial file, which would obviously be accessible by all of the services और individual services जिसको वो belong करती है. तो आप since उस फाइल को read only mode में access कर रहे हो, then possibly you are only reading the valid information. So whatever information is there, you just read it and process the other values within into it. So this particular file would also be present somewhere onto the system which has the executable codes also. So if the file is accessible, then the executable code can also be accessible by the sections of the intruders which are present. So if there is any request which is done by the intruder, it would be preempted because the proxy services do not perform disk access very often. Only once it is done. राइटिंग तो हम कर ही नहीं रहे हैं तो हम जो एग्जिस्टिंग फाइल की वैल्यूज हैं दैट कैन नॉट बी मॉडिफाइड बाय आइदर द प्रॉक्सी सर्विसेज or it can not be modified by any other intruder into the system. Okay. Finally, we say that into the Bayesian host, every proxy service which is running, it would run on a non-privileged user mode. Okay. And each proxy which is running, it runs as a non-privileged user, okay, in a private and secure directory. Clear? So if I want to summarize it, you will say that there is a particular host which can have either ALG or it can have CLG, application level gateway, or a circuit level gateway. This system would be referred as a Bayesian host. This would only run secure OS. Okay. It would also run subset of the services. For example, it would only run secure services like DNS, FTP, HTTP, SMTP. And if there is any additional service which is required, those additional services can be installed by the network administrator on case-by-case basis. Okay? Any doubt? So this is the example of a hardware set, which is a standalone. Next, if I talk about the software system, it would be referred as host-based firewall. Okay, So in a host-based firewall, you will have the firewall installed in a form of a software module. Okay, so this is basically done to secure an individual host. Okay, now the software module versions of firewalls are generally present in many operating systems. Or what you can do is that you can have an add-on package with the existing system. So just like the conventional standalone firewalls, you can have the host-based firewalls, which would restrict the flow of the incoming packets or the outgoing packets. Okay. Now the problem comes in that what would be the location of such firewalls? Okay. Now the common location for such firewalls, which are the host-based firewalls, would be the place where your server is located. Okay. Such cases where you are using a server as a platform to host the firewall would be referring it as server based or a workstation based firewall. Okay, now there are multiple examples or multiple advantages of using such systems. If you use a proper what should I say? If you use a proper workstation based firewall, now in your workstation based firewall, you or in a server based firewall, what would be there? There would be a high amount of security rules or higher amount of filtering or more stringent amount of filtering rules which can be present at the host environment. Okay, so basically the security policies are always present on these firewalls, and these firewalls can further be used by here what are we saying that these firewalls are deployed at the servers, and there are different filters which will be deployed at these servers, and these servers will be used by multiple applications, different applications. So it would be a better secured environment and better filtering process would be handled at the server side. Okay. Also, the protection which would be provided independent to the topology. So whatever attacks are there onto the systems, either it is an internal attack or it is an external attack, all of these traffic will have to pass through the firewall because every request and response would be handled by the at the server end. Okay. The other thing is that you can have the systems which have both the standalone firewalls as well as the host-based firewalls, which obviously provides you a better defense strategy since talking about the multiple layers of security is introduced. Okay, so you can have a new type of server also which is added into your particular network, and it has its own firewall. Now, without the necessity of changing the routes or changing the traffic and directing the traffic to the specific firewall or to the specific standalone system, you can have new systems which act as firewall, and you will not require any need to change the network configurations. Okay, the third version or the third placement strategy of a firewall is normally the firewall which is present into your systems. So you'll have a personal firewall. Okay. So that is a very specific firewall with the limited functionality. It can be used into your home environment or any corporate networks. Or normally this firewall would provide a functionality which can be hosted by a particular router, and it would contain the components of your local system or the DSL or the cable model which is there. Okay. One of the important factor which the personal firewall provides you is the net filter package if you're using Linux as the system. In such cases, when a personal firewall is enabled, all of the inbound connections who are usually denied except for the users who's explicitly permitted. and outbound connections are usually allowed. So for such cases, the inbound services which are selectively enabled with specific port numbers are, I can use FTP, I can have remote login, which is normally done on 222 port number. And the service which can be used is either SSL or SSH. Okay, you can have messengers which are running on specific ports. You can do uh, file sharing, personal file sharing, which is normally done on port numbers 427 and 548. So these are the functionalities which the personal firewalls are providing. You can use FTP on 2021 port numbers. So depending upon the uh, underlying situation or the underlying hardware or the infrastructure, you can have the firewalls embedded into your system. Okay. The the other concept which can be there is the concept of having a distributed firewall. So, over here you have an architecture which talks about distributing the firewall into a proper organization. Okay, so there is a network which is referred as DMZ network. Okay, you have a host resident firewall present. Clear? Any doubt? You have
No,
an
ma'am.
external firewall and an internal firewall present. Okay, so let's talk about these in step by step. First, we'll talk about internal firewalls. Okay, what purpose is this internal firewall serving? This is adding routes or filtering rules or to the traffic which is coming from the open internet directed to the protected network. Okay, so whatever traffic is flowing over here was first filtered out by the external firewall. Okay, once this was filtered out, then it was directed to the internal firewall. That is, this is providing a two-way protection. Okay, first, what would do it do? The internal firewall will protect the remainder of the network from the attacks which are initiated from this set. That is the DMZ network. DMZ is a demilitarized zone. DMZ is referred as a demilitarized zone. Okay. So systems that are externally accessible but need some protections are usually located in this particular DMZ network. Therefore, you have the systems which host the corporate websites or which host the email servers, which host the DNS servers would be placed in this set. Okay. So first thing which we can consider is that if there is any traffic which is spurious traffic which has originated from this location and is directed to this protected network can be prevented by the internal firewall. What else can be done? Here there are multiple firewalls present. One is the firewall which is internal firewall and the other one is a host resident firewall also. Okay, so there are multiple internal firewalls which can be used to protect the other portions of the internal network from each other. Okay, so you can also have network intrusion detection systems or probably a host-based intrusion detection system in conjunction with the firewalls to protect from the attacks which are or the traffic which is originated either from the workstation sites or from the server sites. Fine. Same thing can happen with the other cases as well. You can have an external DMZ network also. Said that in case of honeypots. So we create a decoy system. So similarly, a decoy system can also be created. This is not a decoy. This is just the external DMZ network, which is used for accessing the information from for those users who are not authorized to log in into the system. So this is a proper website the hosting server, which can be accessed by the remote users outside the dedicated network of the organization. And you do not require a firewall for this because since it is present outside the organization, whatever traffics are originated will be directed only to the web server which is placed in the external DMZ network. Clear? So only this much detailed will be there. Details will be covered for your course. We do not have much time so that I can cover any other details. I'll not cover this IPS. If you want, you can go through it. Okay, if I'll cover this IPS, it has to be done in detail, but we do not have much time for it. So this completes your syllabus for NMS. Your minor would be there on the first week of December, and whatever has been given to you now, so from the starting lecture up till today, will be part of your syllabus. So this includes all of the details which were covered in SNMP and network configurations which were told to you initially. Then we had DOS and DDoS and the defenses associated with them. And finally, the IDS and firewalls. Okay. Any other doubts? If you have, you can ask. Your major pattern would be same as it was there for your minor two.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, so you'll have objectives as well as some subjective questions. Obviously, not in detail. Smaller answers would be there. So you'll have to write it in short form.
I'm on Google Form.
Yes, on Google Form. So you last एग्जाम का आपका टाइमिंग 20 मिनट्स था ना 20 to 25 मिनट्स
Yes, ma'am.
तो 20 नंबर का था ये वाला कितने नंबर का करना है 50 का
Yes, ma'am.
मैम 40
ओके
का कर
ओके सो देख लो 45 मिनट्स के आसपास ही होगा उससे ज्यादा नहीं होगा
Okay, ma'am.
सेम आपका जो लैब एग्जाम होगा लैब एग्जाम में भी इट विल नॉट बी ऑब्जेक्टिव it will be based upon your assignments only. जो
Ma'am,
भी
till now, that much is covered in NS2.
हाँ हाँ जितना आपका NS2 में अभी तक कवर किया हुआ है उसी के बेसिस पर आएगा
Okay, ma'am.
Ma'am, we have to execute a program and then there will be MCQ.
नहीं नहीं किसके MCQ
Ma'am, lab.
नहीं नहीं MCQs नहीं होगा लैब में
Ma'am,
असाइनमेंट
say
जैसे अभी तक दिए जा रहे हैं ना आपको बट
yes,
जो
ma'am.
आप अभी टाइम ले रहे हो एक एक दो दो दिन वो नहीं मिलेगा आपको यू विल हैव ओनली 1 or 2 hours फॉर दैट
Okay, ma'am.
ओके
Okay, ma'am.
if you have any other doubt you can post it in the classroom I'll answer it there जिससे कि अगर किसी और को भी डाउट हो तो वो अलग से टेक्स्ट व्हाट्सएप करके ना पूछे इट नीड्स टू बी वेरी पब्लिक So if you have any other doubts, you can post them in your classroom. I'll address it.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Fine, I'll send these
Excuse me, ma'am.
documents. Yes. Yes.
Ma'am, I am getting some error in X graph. Ma'am, in my laptop it is not working.
Post your errors on the classroom. Okay, and
Okay, ma'am.
Himanshu will handle it. If he is not responding, please notify me. I'll ask him to do that.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. Everybody has submitted yesterday's assignment, or still there are people.
Ma'am,
If
I have
you,
not because I have some X graph problem.
what about the rest? If you haven't, please submit it. क्योंकि टाइम से सबमिट करना ज़्यादा ज़रूरी होता है उसमें मार्क्स डिडक्शन भी होता है तो टाइम से सबमिट करिए आप लोग ओके फाइन आई विल सेंड यू द डॉक्यूमेंट्स एंड लेट्स कैच अप ऑन एग्जाम डे ओके
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.